stay here. So grab a drink, grab a blanket, grab whatever you need, and then we will be here. Also, since not a lot of people are here, I'm going to let one of my authors know that I don't know how to pronounce her last book, so she can correct me in a little bit. Okay, more people are joining us. Alrighty, thank you for joining. Once again, I'm seeing more and more ticks up, so we're about to start. Grab a drink and sit down. Here we are. Okay. Welcome, everyone, to Politics and Prose Live. My name is Hannah Manmuller. I'm a bookseller, but then I'm also over the programs and classes here at Politics and Prose. So if you ever want to look up one of those, please let me know. Thank you for joining us today. I realize that we've done a lot of Zooming lately, and here we are again, and I'm very excited for tonight. So for tonight, we have Sarah Ruhl, which she gave me a wonderful little thing a while back on how to pronounce her name. Just remember it rhymes with pool and you'll be set. If you want at any time to ask her a question, you have to put it in the Q&A. So it's going to be at the bottom of your screen. So with that, you'll just pop it up, put in your little question, and then at the end, we'll be able to get to them. But please do put them in at any time, because at the end, you'll forget it. And then you'll be like, I never asked her that question. It was burning inside. So put it in as we go. The other things are, the chat. So at the bottom, there's also going to be the chat. And at the chat, Julia, who is an amazing person who's hiding behind the screens, is going to be putting down where you can buy the book. Please do buy it. It is what supports us. It's what supports Sarah. It's what supports actually a lot of people in this world. So if you are incredibly enthralled by the conversation, please join and please purchase the book. Alrighty, for tonight's humans. Sarah Ruhl is a playwright and a writer of so many other things. She's a poet and an author. She has 15 plays, which include In the Next Room or The Vibrator Play, The Clean House, my favorite, and Eurydice. She has been a 2-time Pulitzer Prize finalist and a Tony Award nominee, which actually comes up in this book quite often. She has won so many other prizes that I can't even list them all, but the other 2 books that she has done is 100 Essays That I Don't Have Time to Write, which was New York Times notable book, and the other one, she has other books as well, but once again, the list is very long. The other one for tonight is Smile, which is fantastic and a lovely, lovely read. In conversation with Sarah today is Catherine Lacey, who is an author of 4 works of fiction, Nobody Is Ever Missing, The Answers, Certain American States, and Pew. If I did say that one wrong, she can correct me.
Just like a church pew, yeah.
Perfect. That's exactly how I read that. It's great. So she has tons and tons of honors. I'll give you a couple. Her honors include the 2021 NYPL's Young Lions Fiction Award, the Witty Award, and inclusion on the Granta's list of Best Young American Novelists. She also has an amazing, amazing website. So you should look at it because it's not normal or standard. And if you want to fall down a rabbit hole, you should fall down hers. It's amazing. Alrighty, that's all that I have right now, except for one more thing. Sarah is actually going to do a workshop later on in November. So if you want to learn more about that, I'm over the moon about it. So if you want to learn more, please click on the link, read a bit about it. And if you want to join us, please do. All right, that's everything. I hope you have a lovely time and conversation's yours.
Hi, I just really want to thank Politics and Prose. I think we need our independent bookstores now more than ever, and I love your bookstore. And I really want to thank Catherine for doing this conversation with me. We met at a conversation with Sheila Heti a couple months back, and the conversation just kept going, and then it kind of spilled out into life. And into a couple walks and talks. And so it seems great to continue the conversation further. And then before we talk, I thought I'd read a little bit from my book so you get a sense of what we're talking about. And then we will dive in and chat.
Sounds good.
Okay. This is so cool. I can see your face as I'm reading, Catherine. That's nice.
You're reading to me. There's actually nobody here. It's just me. Thank you.
Story time in the white room.
Thanks, Sarah.
Chapter 1, Twins. 10 years ago, my smile walked off my face and wandered out in the world. This is the story of my asking it to come back. This is the story of how I learned to make my way when my body stopped obeying my heart. But this story begins with hope, the hope of a very particular birth to come. I was lying down in a dressing gown, cold gel on my belly, waiting as the lab technician looked for a heartbeat. I already had a 3-year-old girl and was expecting my second child. I was also expecting to have a play I'd written to be performed on Broadway in 5 months and was slightly nervous about the potential collision of two kinds of abundance. Suddenly, the lab technician pointed to the screen and said, "Do you know what that is?" "No," I said. I flashed on the ultrasound I'd had before miscarrying my second pregnancy, when the OB had said the fetus looked not quite right and probably wouldn't last. "Don't go out and get drunk though," she said, in a tone not quite teasing, "just in case it's viable." Not to worry," I'd said, wondering what gave her the impression that I would go out and get wasted that weekend. So this time I feared the worst as I lay there, nervous, while the lab technician squinted at a screen I could not see. "Look," she said, pointing. There was movement, a heart beating, it seemed. A heartbeat, that's good, I thought. But what was wrong? Why was her brow furrowed? Was she alarmed? Or wait, was she pleased? "Did you use fertility treatment?" she asked. "No," I said. "Well," she said, "you have twins." "Oh," I said. "Do twins run in your family?" "No," I said. My mind raced to keep up with my body. "You can go to the waiting room," she said. "I'll give you a list of new providers. We can no longer be your OBGYN because your pregnancy is now considered high risk." This was a great deal to absorb, that I now had 2 babies inside me and was considered so high risk, they wanted to get me out of their Soho office as soon as possible before I got preeclampsia and sued them. I got dressed. I happened to be alone for this appointment. I'd planned to meet my husband afterwards for lunch, where we would celebrate if there was a heartbeat or commiserate if there was not. Now I was sorry I'd come alone. I wanted to tell Tony the news immediately, but it also seemed strange to reveal such big tidings over the phone. So I texted him, "Meet me at Gramercy Tavern instead of at Rice." "Twins?" he texted back. Gramercy Tavern was closed for lunch. We went to Rice as planned. We were both in shock. Tony also evinced buoyancy, elation. Coming from a family of 3, he'd always wanted 3. Being from a family of 2, I'd settled on 2. I'd even at one point settled on 1 when I read in an Alice Walker essay that women writers should only have 1 child if they hope to remain writers. "With 1 child, you can move," wrote Walker. "With more than 1, you're a sitting duck." At lunch, Tony and I talked about how my miscarried child had wandered back, not to be excluded from this birth. We talked about how we'd manage with 3. I told Tony my fears that my body could not contain this much abundance and that I'd never write again. He said he had faith in my body and mind. At the end of the meal, I got a fortune cookie. I cracked it open. It read, "Deliver what is inside you, and it will save your life." I wonder, because it's Zoom and because I can't see you all, it's sort of harder to read a room, if it'd be nice to chat a little bit. And then, I can read another passage that tells more of the story of the book, but it seems nice to be in conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm reminded again also of how uncanny it, that opening scene is emblematic of many scenes in the book, that they almost feel like taken out of a play of yours, where there's the ridiculousness of you getting that fortune cookie in that moment, and just the fact that your husband immediately knew that it was twins, and the idea of this lost child coming back. It just seems like it's like, I guess, Sarah Ruhl's life as a Sarah Ruhl play. Like, it sort of felt like this in a certain way, or is full of these kind of like moments of kind of levity and mirroring, and like mythology even in a certain way, or like a folklore. I'm not sure.
You're the only person who said that to me. I love that. It's interesting. There's a play of mine called Late, a Cowboy Song, that features a fortune cookie prominently.
Yeah, I think I think that's maybe the one that I was thinking of.
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, not all of it though, because obviously you're dealing with really, you know, you spend too much time with doctors and hospitals for it to actually remain like fully like full of the kind of humor and levity that I think is and seriousness that is in your work on stage. But I guess I have so many questions. I don't exactly know where to start, but I guess so your husband was the one that encouraged you to write about it, and you were resistant to even writing about the Bell's palsy and everything. It didn't seem like it had any inherent narrative to it, but at some point you kind of gave in and decided maybe it wasn't anti-theatrical, or maybe there was something else you could get from writing about it. And how did in that moment, and then moving forward, how did you organize your thoughts? How did you end up approaching once you kind of relented to the task?
Mm-hmm. Well, so just doubling back for people who don't know about the Bell's palsy element in the book. So, I have the twins miraculously after a high risk pregnancy. And then I got Bell's palsy, which is the paralysis of the seventh cranial nerve, which was the side of my face. And it was really quite frozen for a really, really long time. Most people get better within like 3 months. And I was in this minority, long, chronic boat sufferers. And I thought about it a great deal, but I never wrote about it. And Tony, my husband, who maybe it's because he's a psychiatrist, is quite insightful, or maybe it's just who he is as a person. But he said, you think about this a lot. You've suffered with it. Why are you not writing about it? And I said, it's too personal. It's not theatrical. It's not a story. Why would I write about it? And it turned out that I had to write about it. I had to write my way out of it. I mean, I think most of my plays are a way of writing my way out of something into a new part of my life. And the book is no exception. But it's interesting because in some ways I still do think it's anti-theatrical, because it's sort of more about, it's interesting. In the passage I read, I wrote, my mind raced to keep up with my body. And I feel like in a way, that's the whole book. Like, how did my mind make sense of this thing that was going on with my body? And I think writers often don't think that much about embodiment. That's maybe a ridiculous generalization, but a lot of them don't. The life of the mind is paramount, and the body is sort of to be fed when you're not writing.
Right.
So in that sense, it felt embarrassing to write about the body, but I think I needed to. I think writing the book was helpful to me, and I hope helpful to other people.
I imagine, the way that it reads is that it is, I think, embodiment I wrote down that it feels like a very physical book.
Mm-hmm.
In its presence. You're always sort of, you're always really in scene and important things are happening, and you're just sort of describing the movements through this process of the birth and the recovery and other things that are going on in your life, and then eventually the raising of 3 children and 45 different kinds of vomit. And it's like and then you're writing along, you're also working and having a marriage, and you would think, I think maybe like other people that are either intending to write a memoir or imagining the difficulty of writing one wouldn't think that it would be that simple. And in some ways it is and it isn't.
Mm-hmm.
But I felt like, I think I wrote to you that the book sort of felt like a magnifying glass to me, like going with you through this journey. It just kind of heightened things that I was seeing in the world at the same time. And it really put me in my own body in a certain way.
I love the idea of putting the reader in their own body. That's such a beautiful way of putting it. And I think, as a child, I was sick a lot. And I think reading and writing took me out of the body, took me into other planes. And it's interesting becoming a playwright, because you get actors to do all the embodiment work for you. Mm-hmm. But of course, you're very much writing for the body. You're writing for the voice. You're not writing in a vacuum. And writing a memoir was a different form, but as you mentioned, you know, they're still going into scene. There's still that sense of the body being carried around with you. And I love what you say about a magnifying glass too. And I think the book is a lot about mirrors and what happens when we look at them, and then maybe even reorienting a bit to sort of who your mirror could be as opposed to like what your mirror is. But I love the thought of a magnifying glass.
I do too. I think I told you that, like, I kind of had some readers block. Oh, the other weird thing was, I think in between when we first met and then I knew this book was coming out, and I was like, I saw the description and I just thought, oh, that sounds interesting, and pre-ordered it. And then before the next time I saw you, my dad had a stroke and his left side is paralyzed. And he's okay, he's recovering. And but it was like suddenly I felt like it was this book that was sort of arriving at the right moment where I needed to kind of understand what he was going through in a certain way, but it resonated on so many levels. And after, it was like every book and every like film and everything I interacted with afterwards sort of seemed to be framed through this lens, which I think memoir can do sometimes. I mean, in any kind of work of art can do, but I feel like I've often had this experience through memoir, and maybe it is because, you know, you're escaping into another person and their personal life, and actually that they've put their family and loved ones and self as kind of characters in this book, and it's a real gift in that way, but it also seems really challenging. So I wanted to know also about how you navigated the challenge of taking people you love and these personal experiences to you and turning them into scene and character.
Yeah, it's such an interesting question. And I also just wanted to say, I'm glad your father is doing better. And I just want to read a quote from Virginia Woolf on the Flyleaf, which I find interesting in terms of all these questions. So Woolf, was always sick. And she said, considering how common illness is, how tremendous the spiritual change it brings, how astonishing when the lights of health go down, the undiscovered countries that are then disclosed. It becomes strange indeed that illness has not taken its place with love, battle, jealousy among the prime themes of literature. Like, I was just thinking, like, how many plays have I read about someone having a stroke? I can't think of one. Why? I mean, this is something.
It's very common.
Yeah, it's very common,
Yeah.
And it's very painful. And we use art to investigate painful subjects. And I think it's something about the causality too. We think things are supposed to happen for a reason in literature, from Greek tragedy onward, like the hero is a tragic flaw and then something bad happens. Whereas the theme of going about your daily business and suddenly you have a stroke, or, the rug gets pulled out from under you, which, so many of us who've been ill have experienced that moment of you're just minding your business and the rug of normalcy is pulled out under you. What is the story of that? How can that be made into story?
It's inherently, it inherently gives itself to narrative too, because when you are ill or in pain, you sort of become a child in a certain way where you wonder, is this ever going to happen? Is this ever going to change? Like, what's going to happen next? You're at the mercy of other people. You feel confused. You don't understand how to navigate the world around you. I'm thinking also of there's this memoir by Sarah Manguso called The Two Kinds of Decay that's about, I forget exactly what her illness was that she had, I think maybe still technically has, she had to have all these blood transfusions when she was in college. And it's about these couple years of her life she was very, near to dying a lot of the time. And I was describing it to a friend of mine at the time that I was like, really, I loved that book. And I was trying to convince her to read it. And she said, oh, I don't want to read about that. That's too scary. It's too much, And I think maybe that's part of the reason why we don't see those books.
Do we think
that much.
we'll get ill by reading about illness? Like it's a contaminant?
Yes, or you just get reminded that it's possible, like we get really smug in our health,
Yeah. We do get very smug in our health. And I think this year of COVID and year and a half of COVID, we're no longer smug in our health. Can no longer walk around like horses with blinders through the fire and say, it's other people are getting ill and dying. It's all of us are at some point going to do that.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that literature adds to that denial, the themes of battles and jealousy. And you asked about the genre of memoir too. I mean, I think that the genre of memoir writ large, like the idea of a tell-all memoir, is kind of revolting to me, and I never thought I would write one. But
what do you really mean by a tell-all memoir, though? Sorry to interrupt.
I know. No, I know. You just meant memoir, but I when I hear that word memoir, I think of that. Whereas
Salaciousness or something.
Yeah, I don't know why.
I think they often are. I mean, or they can be. Or it's a yeah.
Whereas something like St. Augustine's Confessions and that trajectory of autobiography, sort of spiritual autobiography, and A Pilgrim's Progress, I devour constantly. I feel like I'm constantly reading those kinds of books because it interests me, a first-person narrative where there's some kind of spiritual transformation at the heart of it. As opposed, yeah, go ahead.
It's the kind of, you're the kind of reader, the kind of writer that thinks someone's like a narrative that happens all interior to a character is worthwhile. Like I feel like there's a kind of dividing line of American readers or film watchers or whatever, where some people are game to be completely invested in the interior transformation of a character, and other people need there to be a war and someone to get jilted at the altar and all these things. But but so much can happen with a person not even leaving a room or just in thought. So
much can happen without leaving a room, as we've learned this past year.
It all ties in.
Yeah, maybe I'll read another little passage that has to do with some of this stuff.
Sure.
Skipping towards the end. I woke up from a dream this morning in which I was saying, in a nutshell, I am not a nutshell. The ends of stories are places to put nutshells, lessons. This is my big chance to tell you how I walked a pilgrim's progress out of the slough of despond into the celestial city, perhaps of Brooklyn. I am suspicious of lessons and morals that I might extract from suffering, so why do I continue to seek them? I'm with the children at a bay in Cape Cod, visiting Paula Vogel, the same teacher who told me I'd write again after having 3 children, the same teacher who said she'd take care of me and then did. Now again, she's making a place for me to write, giving me a desk, and all the Yorkshire tea I want to drink. The twins are looking for shells on the beach. They arrange them on the sand. Which is your favorite, they ask me. I choose a small, iridescent, broken shell. But don't you like this one, they ask, pointing to a less broken, more perfect, bland shell. No, I like the broken shell, I say. It's iridescent. And I think imperfection is a portal, whereas perfection and symmetry create distance. Our culture values perfect pictures, mirage, over and above authentic connection. But we meet one another through the imperfect particular of our bodies. Imperfection calls out for affinity, for the beloved to say, I too am broken, but may I join you? What if I stop thinking of the smile as a flash of symmetry, but instead as a flash of affinity? Symmetry is complete unto itself. Fragility invites care. Asymmetry calls out to a beloved to complete it. Japanese poetry, which celebrates the hidden, the implied, is asymmetrical. The haiku has an uneven number of syllables, 575. Japanese aesthetics also celebrates wabi-sabi, the idea that imperfection is a doorway into a piece of art. This haiku took me, in a sense, 10 years to write. A crooked smile is better than a crooked heart. Open me to God. I just thought I would look at that section just in terms of thinking of this, genre of, I guess, what I would call a pilgrim's progress, and even where God enters in unexpectedly.
Yeah, I guess what I was struck by, I guess part of the like recovery narratives, we think of them as kind of getting from point A to point B, and the person being freed from the illness or freed from the injury or something. And in some ways you do make a kind of an amount of progress, but the more important progress is in the kind of interior spiritual, intellectual progress. And also the wabi sabi as a concept is this sort of like we can know that intellectually. It's really easy to say like, oh yes, I understand wabi sabi as like slight imperfections make things beautiful, but actually to be sort of forced to accept an imperfection that you suddenly and to live with it, and for it to be so central, to actually accept that on a kind of soul level is different than accepting something on an intellectual level. And it is kind of, that seems like a small gap, but it's actually not. I mean, that's, many books could go in between those one point and the other. I'm wondering if, and I think you wrote about it a bit in the book, but I'm wondering if you could talk about if you were in a state of refusing to allow your physical state and concerns affect your creative work, or if you can see places where one was affecting the other in the plays that you wrote, in the essays also that you wrote in that time.
In the essays a bit, and I did write one essay about the Bell's palsy, and 100 essays I don't have time to write. And in the fragmented nature of the essays, because I was really working in short form then, I think less so in the plays that I was writing then. And I think partly it was a desire to keep these on separate tracks. And I think part of what was good about writing this book was to put them together, not to be shoving one set of concerns so deeply aside, even though they were so central to what I was thinking about.
I wanted to know also about why, or at what point did you decide to include photographs in the book, which I just feel like there should be more photographs, especially in memoir, in the way that you did it. But
I wonder when I decided that. I mean, I think I was interested in, some of the art history photographs being there for reference points, but then it was like I couldn't resist the one of my 2 children and the vomit on the floor, just to give like a really visceral sense of what life was like. And then I also think there's such a desire to not have pictures of asymmetry in the world. And I myself, when the Bell's palsy was deeply acute, really didn't want to be photographed. But I felt a kind of responsibility in this book to kind of say, no, this picture should be included, and not only included through making words about it.
Right. Yeah, it is so much too, like because most people have some sort of camera on their phone, and a lot of us have gotten into the habit of sort of taking like a billion useless photos. Maybe one every once in a while is actually a photo. The rest of them are just sort of like a nervous tick that we all have. It especially makes sense. But I loved also and I know you wrote in the book that you hated this picture, but it's the portrait that was in Vanity Fair right after you had the children and everything had happened, and you couldn't do anything, and so you're just standing there like this kind of blank page. I think it's the most powerful photo, because especially at that age, you don't get to see a woman like a beautiful woman who's being celebrated for something just be completely blank, and I felt like that's a stance of power in a certain way, even though it was what you had, but I was glad to see that one.
I was certainly not providing a compulsory smile.
No.
but it was the anecdote in the book that I tell is I had been nominated for a Tony Award, and so there was this kind of red carpet party, and the phalanx of photographers was like, smile, and I stepped up for my turn and tried my best, but really couldn't smile. And the photographer said, "What's wrong with you? Can't you smile for your Tony Award?" And I said, "No, I can't. My face is paralyzed." And then I felt sudden embarrassment for him, compassion for him, because he said, oh, I'm sorry. And then he kind of quietly took the picture and left. But yeah, that face in that photograph has a deep opacity. And I can't say that I'm fond of that photograph, but I see what you're saying about its strength in a way.
Well, you're seeing it from the inside versus like me seeing it from the outside is quite a different thing. But I guess it's kind of you to feel any sympathy for this man that was trying to tell you how to present yourself, because it's just up to you how to present yourself. And you had every right. I mean, Eurydice especially is a quite serious play. It's somber, and you know, I mean, it's just expert and beautiful. And you were given this award for it because of the play, not because you could get up on stage and smile. You know, kind of feel like we don't give women. Still, it seems like the right just to be neutral. Like they have to perform this clever, like this excitement all the time. And I find myself kind of knee jerk doing it in times when I don't want to. I want to channel that opacity, I guess, that I see there, you know?
Well, I love, the story about Simone Biles. At some point, some commentator told her to smile more, and she said, smiling doesn't win you gold medals.
That's right. Yeah, I think.
Yeah. And I realized that there's
we do have a couple
questions in the Q&A.
They are stacking up. So I'll go to the first one that came in.
Okay.
Sarah, your work does so much to intimately and powerfully portray women's lives and psyches. Who are you inspired by, and what other playwrights, authors should we look to in 2021?
I'm inspired by so many people. I always start with my teachers because they were such a big influence on me. So Paula Vogel. I also studied with Maria Irene Fornes, who's an incredible playwright. Lynn Nottage is a colleague, friend, and someone who inspires me. Hansel Jung is a former student who really inspires me. I'm trying to think of work that's coming. Lynn Nottage's work is going to Broadway to second stage really soon, and I'm deeply excited about that. And I'm also inspired by, fiction and nonfiction and poetry. You should read Catherine's work, and I'm excited about the new Sheila Heti book I just got, Pure Color. Carrie Fountain's another poet I have on my desk right now, who wrote a book called The Life, which in some ways I feel like is in conversation with this book and 100 Essays I Don't Have Time to Write. She's writing, it's also a deeply embodied book of poetry about motherhood and reflections on how even like the most minor detail, like the question of whether to use glitter on a Valentine and her child's disappointment when they don't use the glitter, or getting goldfish to teach her children about death, but then realizing she's the one flushing them down the toilet and they're not learning their death lessons. It's just really a wonderful book.
Wait, who is that again, that last one?
Carrie Fountain, The Life. Okay. She's the poet laureate of Texas, I think.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Okay. Another person says, I'm struck by the comment that writing that puts the reader in their body. I feel like we've been more aware of our bodies during the pandemic. Did either of you find that to be true, and has it inspired any writing or insight?
What about you? Did you find yourself writing about the body?
I'm not sure what I was writing. I mean, it was a really blurry time. I don't really know what was going on in terms of like being creative, but I do remember at some point realizing that I just hadn't been observed. Like I had been observed by, I live with my partner and my partner's mother and my dog. But I hadn't thought about my body from the outside. I had been thinking about myself from the inside a bit more. I do think it was for those of us with enough free time and no chaos and 4 different kinds of school running inside of the same house. It was a really good time for writing. I think the reason I don't know what I wrote is that I wrote something. I wasn't unhappy. And I think it partially was because I wasn't thinking about what I looked like from the outside, and I wasn't thinking about accommodating anybody else's anything, which, turns a person kind of sour at a certain point. But for a couple months, at least, it was nice.
I feel like I did become more aware of the body's essential needs, that it has to be fed 3 times a day, and that ritual was important to organizing the time with the kids. And I felt more aware of nature, because I didn't have culture. My culture is, so much of it is the theater, which is indoors. It was gone. So obviously I had books, but I felt like I needed something to replace the theater. And for me, that was the theater of nature and the natural world. So I wrote one haiku a day, and they often had to do with the natural world. And that was very satisfying to have that be more present in my life.
Seems like a good one. Someone wants to know if any of your doctors were aware that you're working on the book, and did you include their observations in any way?
It's interesting. I didn't really talk to any of my Western doctors about it. Like the first neurologist I saw was truly not that helpful. And the second neurologist I saw was helpful. I probably should give him a copy of the book. I found an acupuncturist who really helped me, who also is a writer, and she's hilarious. And so I did give her a copy of the book, an early draft.
There are a lot of bad doctors, I should say, and then in the story, but then some good ones that you come across. Yeah. And there is something sort of, there's a kind of commonality, I think, between like bad doctors and bad writers, where they're not making any space for the person they're taking care of. You kind of have to leave some space for the reader and think about it from their perspective to some degree, in the same way that you have to think about a patient.
Bad doctors and bad writers both don't listen. I think
exactly.
That's one thing they have in common. They blather on and they don't listen.
Has your experience changed the way you write? I mean that in terms of the wordsmithing, but also the logistics. Do you still sit at a keyboard?
Logistics is the same. The way I write, same. Boring answer. I'm sorry.
It's okay. Relationship to self-image. Do either of you have thoughts about the recent reporting that seeing ourselves on Zoom cameras and advertising on social media is causing negative self-image?
I do. And I think with Bell's palsy, there's a gap between, or for me, between what you see in the mirror and what your internal experience is. And I fear that for girls, with this news study about Instagram giving girls horrible opinions of themselves, there's a weird, is reification the word? That the image becomes the self becomes the image, the gap between the public and private starts to disappear. You are the image that you're putting into the universe. You don't have an inner life. I think it's quite bad. I mean, I really blame, I don't know who to blame. Is it Steve Jobs is to blame? Is it, Facebook is to blame? But something needs to be done about it look, I'm not the only one who's on Zoom feeling self-conscious. There's a function called hide self-view, which I always do. And
very important.
I want to write an essay called Hide Self-View. So I know that so many of us don't like looking at our own faces while we're speaking. It's an unnatural thing to do and quite narcissistic, really. They should figure out Zoom without that function, because suddenly you're your own mirror as opposed to your interlocutor. So right now I have my self-view turned off and I'm talking to Catherine, which is better. But I do feel like we're dissolving into surfaces, and it's kind of terrifying.
I do think, this idea of there's always a gap between what you see in the mirror, what you see in photographs, and then how you see yourself internally. And there's also a gap between mirror and photographs and what other people see. And there's all these gaps. And I feel like it's enough to drive a person crazy if you're trying to, close them. But I think the only thing, it seems like this, the Instagram study and everything, it's like, not who is surprised by that? Nobody, you couldn't possibly have been surprised by it, but because it's the same, it's just media kind of made a little bit more potent, a little bit more close. But I think you touch on this in the book in so many different ways of you eventually just, you don't need to know what you look like. It's not actually your business. And there's some freedom in like, it doesn't actually matter. It doesn't matter, you know? And like, I think that's, you can know that intellectually and then actually like really absorbing it later is, I think that they call that maturity or, you know,
growth. I mean,
something.
I had been like shocked to find out about this concept in Buddhism called the original face. And it's kind of a Zen koan about what did your face look like before your parents were born? Or what was your face before your parents had faces? And so it kind of makes you think through what that could be. Well, what then is the self? Is the self the face? If the self is not the face, what is it? Can you locate a self before the self existed? And so that made me think, oh, I've been thinking way too much about this paltry, trivial old face that I had and not enough about my original face. Or I was just reading an article in Tricycle today about some Zen master who said something about the face is a portal through which a man of no rank, a man without rank, comes and goes. And I thought that was so beautiful, this idea that all your faces is a place for a person without rank to come and go. So it is a portal, I think. And I think what was very hard for me in the acute phase of Bell's palsy was I felt like it was not a portal. My spirit couldn't come and go because I felt like I couldn't accurately express emotion. And I think writing the book helped me through that. This is a funny question to me. How do you balance time spent at work and time spent at leisure? Ha ha ha. I have no leisure. I don't know what that is. But I do have a resolution for this coming year to have more fun. This is my resolution, to see more old friends more often and to have more fun doing apparently useless activities. What about you, Catherine? Do you have fun or balance your work and leisure time?
I don't. I think I genuinely like the work I do, and so I don't feel that much of a need to really like have a lot of leisure. I also have like, you know, I have a lot of time. Like I do have leisure time. It's just like I just stare out the window. Like I don't need to do anything to feel like I'm like I don't know. I don't have any real like I should get some hobbies.
They say that you're happier if you have hobbies.
Yeah, I mean, do I have? I feel like cooking and cleaning and sort of learning how things are built and sort of like just tending a house, tending my partner and his parent and our dog. Like those are all, that's activity, you know. I don't really take any of these.
Could a dog be a hobby? Having a dog
has to be.
That's
well, if I'm not going to get the life extension from or the happiness extension from the hobbies, I'll get it from the dog owning, because I think that's been proven, right? Dog owners are better off.
Yeah.
Somebody wants to know about how you're feeling about re-entering theater space.
I feel excited and tremulous, you know. I went to see Passover on Broadway, which was extraordinary, Antoinette Nwandu's play, and I was very moved by it, but I also couldn't quite relax into it yet. You know, someone had a dry cough in front of me, which I'm sure was fine. But I couldn't quite, interesting, going back to the body, I couldn't forget my body while being with other bodies, which is kind of the catharsis of the theater. It's like, oh my God, all these bodies together, but we're one body and we're sort of forgetting we have a body until someone has a dry cough. But with COVID, you're sort of really aware of people's bodies. I felt more freed and more moved being at rehearsal at the Metropolitan Opera, which I just started this rehearsal for Eurydice as an opera. And I was backstage and I felt so moved by being in the workmanlike part of theater, you know, backstage, guys moving a piano. There's some ridiculous prop with gilt, like a scimitar that almost fell on my head. And I was like, yes, this is it. I was so excited about it.
I wanted to ask you more about it, actually. You wrote the libretto for for you're going to see the opera.
Mhm.
And when's opening?
November 23rd.
That's so exciting.
And for those out of town, they have that, Met HD thing, so you can watch it simulcast. I think it's
Oh,
maybe December 5th is that day
oh, that's
at
so
a movie
exciting.
theater.
Oh, nice, nice. Well, I hope there's a Chicago one.
Yeah, there should be.
Great, wonderful. Somebody's asking a question that was sort of similar to something I didn't get to. When you're writing characters for theater, do you stay away from picturing them in any sort of physical way, or do you have them materialize in your imagination?
I don't really picture them physically, but the weird part about that is that in auditions, when a body walks in, I feel like, oh, yeah, that's a Virginia, or that's not a Virginia, or oh, Tilly just walked in the room. And how could I know that if I wasn't picturing them physically? But I do think it has something to do with temperament and the soul. I remember doing a reading of The Clean House once in London, and the person playing Lane was supposed to be playing Virginia. Like the sisters were miscast. And I was like, oh. And I remember we had our tea break, and everyone's always having tea breaks in England. Like, it's not like Actors Equity here where it's like you have it's like time for tea. And I was like, grabbed the director and said, would they mind if we switch them? The souls are in the wrong bodies. It's very distracting to me. And he said, oh, let me have a chat with them. And they switched, and then it was fine. Everyone was in the right body again.
Oh, wow.
I don't really, I couldn't tell you what their hair color is or what their body shape is, but
right. But I think it's a sort of embodiment, but it's embodiment from the interior of the character rather than the exterior of the character. Like I feel like this is something I always come up again in workshops or just in my own writing is if we're thinking about a character from what they look like it's like we can get hung up on the physical attributes in a way that's not helpful to actually knowing what that character's like from the inside out.
I was reading a wonderful book about metaphor, and I forget what it is, but it was talking about the very specific experience we have picturing characters when we're the reader, and how usually it's like the flash of one thing, it's like a flash of a certain kind of eye, and it's plenty, it's quickly drawn, and then you see it embodied in a film, and sometimes you're like, it's all filled in now. I wanted that little brushstroke, that vague brushstroke where I knew how the eyes moved, but I didn't know anything else.
I feel like sometimes I cast my friends in the parts of people, of like, if I'm reading a novel, I'll be like, oh, that looks like Sean, or this person talks like this. I'm just like, okay, now this person's playing them in my head. Yeah, it's fun. What surprised you while writing Smile? Any discoveries? Worst part, best part of putting it together? Surprises?
I feel like I'm constantly surprising myself when I'm writing. And in that sense, like, I don't know how to say this particular thing surprised me when the whole experience was a surprise. But the form of it was kind of like peeling an onion. It was kind of like I knew what the whole thing was, but I didn't know how it would be organized. So I knew the ending, I knew the beginning, and then I was just kind of filling it out and peeling and peeling and peeling and peeling. I think one thing I did not know when setting out to write it was that there was some shame involved in having Bell's palsy. I never would have thought it, because my rational mind, which I prize highly, would think, why would you feel that? That's silly. Why would you feel shame about something beyond your control to do with your face? But in the writing of it, at peeling the layers away, I was like, oh, there's that emotion, shame, that took me by surprise.
Shame is sneaky like that. It's like you can open a little shame pouch and it's like glitter. It gets all over everything. It takes a long time to get it out. And you're like, oh, I'm still picking this goddamn shame out of here. Are there any projects that have cast against type that have surprised you in a good way or made you rethink the piece? I guess this plays of yours that I think that's what they mean.
Yes, I'm sure that has happened. But when was that? I don't know. I mean, I love when things are cast against gender, expected gender.
Right.
I remember my play Passion Play that was very first at Arena Stage. I think I wrote, so Queen Elizabeth becomes Hitler, becomes Ronald Reagan, and it had usually been played by a man. And then Kathy Chalfant in Chicago did all three. And I was like, Kathy Chalfant also is a great Hitler.
Uh-huh.
So I'm always delighted when that happens. I just see my friend Karen in the chat, my dear friend Karen Zacharias from Washington, D.C. Oh, yeah.
So she's asked to tell everybody else, she's asking, what is the most surprising reaction you've gotten from writing this book?
Your fellow Bell's playwright. Yeah. I mean, I've had a lot of kind of very moving people in audiences or direct messages who've had Bells. One woman who said that she also got it postpartum, which can be a thing. And she said she would just sob in her closet, and that not being able to smile at her baby was worse than the pain of, delivery, which definitely resonated with me. There was one man in an audience who said that his father came back from World War II with Bell's palsy. And just like the war, they never talked about either thing, never talked about his changed face, never talked about the war. Talked to a woman from LA who'd been an actress in LA, but on camera, and the Bell's palsy never went away. So she just stopped acting and moved to Rhode Island and got a totally different career. So, Karen, you asked about the most surprising reaction. I guess those aren't surprise. Oh, here's a surprising one. Tina Howe surprised me. So my good dear friend Tina Howe, who's like in her 80s, read the book and she said, Sarah, I love the book, but I had no idea that you're a little bit vain. Are you vain? I had no idea you thought about your face. I thought you thought about your soul all day long. You couldn't care less about your face. And I thought it was so funny because I was like, well, Tina, the bar is kind of like low here, the vanity bar, like I just was like, rather not be disfigured, in that kind of territory. But I thought that was interesting and interesting for people in general who are thinkers or activists or, think of themselves as serious-minded people interested in the life of the mind, that of course we're a little bit vain. We live in a vain culture. It's so vain we don't even think to call it vain. It's just the entire water we swim in,
Yeah. I mean, it seems more like the trouble you're having is not, at least in my experience of reading it, it wasn't an issue of vanity so much. It was just like the terms changing of how you did so many things. And there's not that much really about like, it seems more like it's a mode of communication that you feel like you're losing, and you're trying to find a way to navigate and get around into.
Well, I think ultimately the book is much less about beauty than it is about the emotions and about the whole. What really upset me was being robbed of the ability to express emotion, and that was very hard. And getting that back was sort of hard won through physical therapy and other modalities. But to me, that was the particular hell that I felt like I was in, which also, of course, relates to acting and the theater. The idea that your face is your canvas and you're not communicating. And I think that I learned other ways to communicate. And I learned that I actually was communicating all along with my voice, go figure. So
I guess it's sort of nice to have that friend say that she thought you'd just sit around thinking about your soul all day. Like, what sort of person would that be? That's like, she must think you're the most uncommon person that ever existed.
Well, Tina's very nice that way.
Yeah. This will be our last one. And I'm sure you get this question a lot, but for aspiring playwrights, what are your initial steps about getting work produced or even presented casually? Did you ever shyly ask your friends to read through your work to hear how it sounded?
I sure did. I sure did shyly ask my friends to do that, and I still do. I think it's wonderful to hear friends read your work aloud in a living room before taking it wide, because you hear so much, it's like a piece of music and it's hard to hear it without hearing it aloud. And also with COVID, now you could have friends do it on Zoom. I sometimes will give it to a dear director friend or dear playwright friend before taking it wider. The great thing about the days we live in now is, you don't have to Xerox your play to send it out. So the postage is eliminated. So all these kind of steps in the physical world, like the mailman and the Xerox, they're eliminated. So then you just fling it through the ether to these theater companies and see if they'll do it. And I feel for you as an aspiring playwright, which it sounds like you are, an anonymous attendee, because it's a hard moment to be emerging. It's just such a changed landscape, and becoming a playwright requires a lot of patience and rejection tolerance, even on a good decade. But in this decade of COVID, it's going to be a little harder. So, the tenderness of asking your friends to read through, I think, is even a better idea, to think about how can this play inform my small community and give me a sense of pleasure and joy even before it gets presented by a bigger institution.
Well, this was great. This was a lot of fun, and I'm so glad I got to talk to you about this. I still have I'm looking at my carnage of notes, and I always like doing this when I'm about to talk to somebody I'm excited about. Where just think one piece of paper is not enough, and things just go crazy. But I love this book. It made me so happy. It really just cut through in such a way, and I hope a billion people read it and get to feel that way too. So anybody that's here that hasn't bought it yet, it's a good time just to buy it from Politics and Prose. Here we are.
It's all right there in the links.
Yeah,
it's so simple.
Well, and I am so glad our conversation continued from Zoom into real time in Chicago and back to Zoom.
And I'll see you in New York sometime. And we'll just
Catherine reminds me of a young Flannery O'Connor. Do people say that?
I hope a little less racist.
For sure less racist. My God.
I'm kidding. I'll take it. Yeah.
But go grab her books as well from Politics and Prose.
Perfect. All right. Thank you guys both. I'll thank you all so much for talking. Thank you for discussing in such great length and detail. It was lovely. It was lovely to hear. For everyone who's buying the book, thank you so much. Also, if you're going to do the workshop comes with the book. So if you don't want the book twice, just get the workshop and then you'll get the book too. That is most of what I have. The last thing that I have is a question for both of you. And that is, what are you currently reading?
I have it right here, so I'm going to show it to you.
So prepared.
This is a debut novel by Gene Quack. I think that's how you say his last name. And it's about the body in some ways, about a wrestler, and it's funny and it's weird, and the sentences are great, and it has a kind of road trip element to it, which is also really satisfying. So and I'm talking to him in 2 hours.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I am reading my dear friend Kira Hudis's memoir, My Broken Language. And Kiara has also done a bunch in DC and was also a student of Paula Vogel's. So I feel like they're, our memoirs are a little bit sister memoirs.
It's really good. We did an event with her at Politics and Prose a while back. I was hosting that with her, and we have the video up on our YouTube page. So if you ever want to watch it for the audience, just look it up. It's right there. It was amazing because it was also with Lynn.
Good.
So it was so good. But anyway, thank you both so much and have such a lovely night. Thank you, audience.
Thanks for having us.